All right. We were talking about Alan Dershowitz, and I was trying to find a little later video because the ones I had seen came out in March and April. So I did find this newer one. This came out right after the skull pictures, after George's bloody skull pictures came out. Remember, they had said for 3 months, oh, there was no bloody skull, and we were saying, well, I think somebody took some pictures, but we haven't seen them. The police are keeping them secret. But the defenders of Trayvon's assault and attack suggested there never was a reason that George never really got hurt. And then when those injuries pictures did come out, they said, "Oh, that's just little scratches." I mean, big gash and one's nasty beating abrasion, and they're like, "Well, that wouldn't happen from hitting your head on the concrete." Yeah, well, go out there and hit your head hard enough to break the skin. Give that a little try. See what that feels like, and tell me. You got to crack the skin, so you see what happens see if you can get it to break in the same fashion. So we've got Alan on the show here with Huckabee, and I wanted to talk about that.
It's finally released this week by the prosecutor's office. Shows Zimmerman suffered 2 black eyes, a broken nose, and cuts to the back of the head. Injuries that could have been caused during a struggle. Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz says the prosecutors have bungled the case. I spoke to him earlier. Great to have you here. There was some shocking evidence that came forward this week that was released, not only about the medical condition of George Zimmerman, which was not included in the prosecutor's affidavit, but also indication close-range gunshot wound to Trayvon Martin and no other signs of injury other than bloody knuckles indicating that they might have been used to create the broken nose on George Zimmerman. What is most shocking about the new evidence and the fact that we haven't heard it before?
What's most shocking is that the prosecutor was aware of most of the evidence in general outline, and she made a deliberate, willful, unethical, unprofessional, and illegal decision to withhold that evidence, not from you and me in the media, but from the courts and from the affidavit that she filed in support of an overblown second-degree murder prosecution.
You mentioned illegal. That's a strong word.
It is.
Your allegation is that because she knowingly, willingly, deliberately withheld critical evidence that would affect the outcome, not only of public opinion. This is not about what the public thinks. This is about the guilt or innocence of a man accused in a court of law.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important in this case, and a lot of people were arguing with me about this. I suggested in an earlier video that she should be fired. Well, not only should it be a firing, but she should be arrested. I should change the name of that title. In fact, I think I'll make this one that. Angela Corey should be arrested. She knowingly broke the law and smiled while she did it. I was just watching the video yesterday of her making the arrest of George Zimmerman public, and the whole time she was smiling, and it was funny because she was saying it both ways. Yes, it's we want both sides to get a fair treatment, but at the same time she's saying that it's her job to make sure that Trayvon gets justice, and that's not true. Her job is to bring out all the truth, not supposed to hide stuff. Well, she obviously hid the pictures. We didn't see those pictures. The judge that gave George a bond never saw those pictures. Don't you think that would have been some information the judge would have liked to have had, Judge Lester, at the time? You think he maybe could have made a better decision on the case if he would have been able to see that George was all of the evidence, everything that George said was corresponding with the evidence that they had? But she didn't even discuss that. She made it sound like George chased down Trayvon and started the argument and then the attack. She had the knowledge of the injuries to George, and she had the knowledge of Trayvon's fist having damage to it.
To a different level, does it
not?
not?
And she may have done even worse than that. The information suggests that she actually may have withheld some of this information from the police officer whose affidavit she submitted. In other words, she may have laundered the information in a way to permit that police officer to file an affidavit that didn't include this material, and then she could say, you know, sitting there like the, I don't see anything, I don't know anything, he didn't know about that. But the prosecutor's office was fully aware of much of this information when they filed that affidavit. And then you mentioned in your intro that the media talked about profiling. It was the prosecutor who talked about profiling. In the affidavit itself, he uses the term that Zimmerman was profiling Martin. And when he was asked about it, what was the basis? He didn't have any basis. It was just made up.
And that's a very subjective point of view, to get inside the mind of George Zimmerman, unless he has maybe blogged or written or somehow spoken on the record.
And worse than that, this was the whole leading of the story in the media, was that George was a racist, a white racist who chased down and murdered a child because he was black. That was the whole storyline. And the media enjoyed that storyline. The New York Times refuses to release that. They still carry that around, at least up until the point that this video was made, the Huckabee show.
That he was racist, comments that indicated that he distrusted people of color. There is no indication. I think it's his either grandfather, great-grandfather who was African-American, his father was Hispanic. I sometimes get a little confused even when people use the term white Hispanic, which we even said in the intro. I'm not sure what that means. The point is, you can't just allege racism, can you, in legal filings, unless there is some evidence to indicate that?
No, and certainly when you're filing an affidavit, it has to be based on the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And if you deliberately submit a half-truth, that's a lie. And this affidavit and the submissions by the prosecutor constituted a half-truth. That is a lie, and she ought to be investigated for what she's done. She's also done something much worse. She sees her job, essentially, is to prevent riots. She said, essentially, reading between the lines, I'm not interested in justice for Zimmerman. Her job is to do justice for Trayvon Martin, and that's obviously not the prosecutor's job. But she's raised expectations. She's indicted or informed for second-degree murder. There was never any basis for second-degree murder. That raises expectations. No reasonable jury, we can get to the jury in a minute because it's going to be very hard to get a jury that isn't afraid for its own life if it acquits. But no reasonable jury will convict on the basis of this evidence for second-degree murder.
So what he just said there, that little clip I just wanted to say, that no reasonable jury would convict a person for murder under these circumstances, but he just said that because of what the expectations that she raised, that now if there isn't a conviction, there's going to be riots, and her whole job was to stop riots.
Expectations will be raised and then lowered, and if there are, God forbid, any riots or demonstrations, the finger of responsibility will point directly at this prosecutor.
I almost can't imagine they're not.
So I'm assuming, since he said that, and now we know that all those people that are thinking about rioting should consider her, because if there are riots, we're going to be looking to her for that.
Type of very violent reaction, given that there was a pretty violent, I guess, prelude even before charges were filed. People were absolutely demanding that someone get arrested, that someone get charged, that someone go to jail for this. Now, if Zimmerman ends up getting acquitted, or even perhaps more, maybe interestingly, the charges dropped, this could make the Rodney King aftermath look tame.
Well, you know, you can understand why there'd be reaction, because the public wasn't aware of the facts. Take, for example, he wasn't arrested. He was arrested. He was handcuffed. He was involuntarily put in a police van, taken to police headquarters. I teach criminal law. That is an arrest. He was arrested. He was then released when the prosecution couldn't make out a case. In fact, one of the officers recommended a prosecution, though not for murder, for manslaughter. It never occurred to anybody to charge for murder.
And remember what he just said there? That was the knowledge and the information we had back then. Later on, we found out that the officer who suggested there be a charge for manslaughter only made that suggestion based on the insistence by two black officers and one white lady who was married to a black officer. So there were three people with a reason to want to see charges made, apparently because of skin color. That's one of the things that really bugs me about this case, is that people are more concerned with skin color than they are about justice, and that it appears that it's going that way, where people are leaning to a conviction based on the fact that the victim was black. That's just the most ridiculous thing.
Politically motivated prosecutor who has a terrible reputation for overcharging came in and said, might as well charge for second-degree murder. I'll be a hero. By the time the case gets resolved years from now, people will forget about that. And she eliminates responsibility. The Justice Department has a slogan on its front door. It says, the government wins whenever justice prevails. That's the job of the prosecutor, and she has not been doing her job.
It's always a pleasure to visit with you, and thanks.
So that's the main point of the video, and that's what I've been saying all along. Absolutely, the prosecution is not. See, this is what people don't understand. They see this as a football game. And on the one side, you've got the red team, and on the other side, you've got the blue team. And that's not the way it is. You've got the defense, who's there to defend the one person who's being charged. And there's only one person that has anything to lose in this case. Only one person. That's the one that's being defended. That's why the rules are skewed to their side. So if you're going to look at it as a football game, you should think of it as a football game on a hill. And the defending side is on the top of the hill, going down, trying to get their ball on the other side of the goal on the downhill side. And the prosecution has to go uphill. And we do that so that if you're charged, if you're being held responsible for a crime that you didn't commit, you want to be on that kind of field. It's only fair. So, sometimes it seems unreasonable. You're like, why is it that these guys get off on a murder charge that's pretty obvious? A lot of these cases, there's a lot of cases where people got off where the charge was pretty solid. I mean, we saw what happened to OJ. So people do get off when they shouldn't. I mean, it's just clear. It's obvious. Like, the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. But, the guy's got his fingers all spread out so the glove won't fit. I mean, let me pull that glove over his hand. It would have fit perfectly. Or better yet, let me go get a brand new glove of exactly the same size and put it on him. One that hasn't been soaked in blood and that is now kind of in a tighter condition so it won't squeeze in so easily. Anyhow, Corey should be arrested. This would really be great if she could be, that right now they're pulling out all these punches to try to make George look guilty. That would be something to counterblow, you know what I mean? Make it look like, what, she got arrested? The prosecutor got arrested? What for? And then people would look into that and say, oh, I see. She lied and she covered up all the evidence that supported George. No wonder she got arrested. And then people would maybe change their attitude about George. But that ain't, it's just not going to happen until they take control of the media. There's a real problem with the media. And until we get that fixed, we can't have fair elections. We're never going to be able to have an honest government. As long as the government and the media are in bed together, the people are screwed. So good talking to you guys. Have fun. Talk to you later.